And welcome back to Chapter 5 of Engage and Grow. Evaluate was obviously step one, set the benchmark. Now we've got to create buy-in. We've got to look at a collective buy-in of all of the people. Do they want to go on the journey with us? Now, Mark, you've studied and created, the 5 C's of creating the buy-in is really important to understand, first of all. So take us through those so we can get a good framework for where this begins.
Well, for me, you know, my life began at high school meeting an interesting guy in the principal's office, and that's where the C's really started to germinate over the years. And in this principal office, I met this guy by the name of Steve Jobs in Homestead High School in Cupertino. And I won't tell you why we're in the principal's office, except that it's kind of double jeopardy because my mother actually was the principal's administrative assistant, so we don't really want to go there. But one of the interesting insights that I had from meeting him for the first time is that I realized that he scared the heck out of me. His ambitions, his ideas were very, very different. And as we all know, famously, at 21 he starts the company. At 23, he's famous. At 30, he's thrown out. Comes back when he's 43. And so I got to reconnect with him when he was making the big comeback. And he'd learned a lot from that time he was humiliated and he was ostracized from the company. And that's really where these principles came from, because the Steve 2.0 wasn't like the guy who just tossed people out or humiliated them at the water cooler. And so one of the areas he realized is that culture matters. The first C is culture, this idea that not all places are created the same. If I don't show up in a suit at some banks, they don't take me seriously. At Charles Schwab, we had to be buttoned down. They won't give you the money, Mark, unless you're really there to show them that you deserve to be able to be the custodian of that. If I show up that way at Google, I had no credibility whatsoever. So that's a simple example of culture, but thinking about that cultural context in which you're doing the engagement program matters. What is really valued by that culture? Another is creativity. Creativity doesn't mean the same thing to all people. For some people, it might be more structured creativity. It's like, how can we improve the process of this, is the way that company is wired. Others, creativity might be, well, let's create the new Pixar movie. I work with Pixar a lot. It's interpreted in a very different way. But everybody at the end of the day wants to feel like they can be creative. If you can do that, they will buy in with you. Another area is capacity. Do we really resource the capacity for that department or that person or that team to do what you've ambitioned them to do?
Yeah, don't set the goal and then hold them back.
Holy cow, this is why
they actually achieve what they need.
Exactly, this is why high achievers leave companies all the time, because you didn't actually allow them to do great work. You didn't give them the resources. You didn't back them up on the front line. Another area has to do clearly with competence. This idea of competently being able to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. I did my first bestseller, Success Built to Last. It was a sequel to Jim Collins and Jerry Porras. And Jim and I really helped me look at this idea that we need to get the right people in the right seats. It's not just a matter of there being A, B, and C players. We don't just judge the players. Getting people in their swim lanes, operating at their highest and best purpose, and get the competency where it really matters. And so that's very important. And then communication. Are we willing to really have those courageous conversations so that we, that 800-pound gorilla or that elephant in the room, we often will shoot the messenger. What we should do is shoot the elephant. So if we could really get in there and communicate and have the tough conversation about what we care about and how we might be in conflict with that, are we really applying that? Are we incentivizing that? That was the kind of framework that the Steve Jobs Apple 2.0 really made a difference.
Very, very important stuff. Now, when it comes to buy-in, Marshall, there's a difference between the perception and the reality, because I think that's something you're a genius at.
Well, let me talk about how it works in my job, because actually I get paid not only because behavior change, perception changes. I get paid because you are seen as a different person, not by yourself or me, by everyone around you. And and I teach leaders to follow up. And I talk about how important follow up is. As you mentioned, this frequency thing, very important. Well, when I do this, I'm often asked, do people really change behavior, or are they merely perceived as changing because they keep following up? And the answer is the opposite of what you might think. It's much easier to change behavior than to change perception.
I agree.
Changing perception is very hard. Let me give you a simple example. Let us imagine your problem is you make too many destructive comments about others. Now, I pick that, it seems so simple. So that's easy to fix, quit doing it. Case study A, you go 7 months to never make a destructive comment about anyone. 7 months later, stupid SLBs on finance, idiot bean counters. I'm your coworker, I hear you. You know what I think? Brad has never changed. Case study B, you talk to me. Marshall, I get this feedback. I want to do a great job of being a team player, not make comments, give me ideas. I'm not sure you're going to change. I'll talk to you. 2 months later, though, Marshall, it's been 2 months. I want to be a great team player, not make these comments, give me ideas. Now I think, hey, you're getting better, Brad. Good. 4 months. Good job. 6 months. You know, Brad, I didn't think you'd change. You worked really hard. Thank you. 7 months. Stupid SOBs in finance. I say, Brad, you went 7 months without doing that. You shouldn't have said that. You say, you're right. I'm going to apologize. Situation A, did behavior change? Yes. Did perception change? No.
Yeah.
Situation B, did behavior change? Yes. Did perception change? Yes. And as you know, in leadership, it doesn't matter what we say. All that matters is what they hear.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant stuff. Now, Rich, when it comes to getting buy-in of an entire organization, I want to touch on first, though, there will be some buyout.
Yes.
So, you know, some people will be in that, it's not my job, that's not my thing. Give us some more thoughts on that.
So with buying, you can't go too wide. You've got to keep it like a tribe. And you get a tribe to buy in. If you go too far, then it'll just lose its momentum. So buy-in to me is like creating a movement. And so really it's just about getting the key people in together. And I'll give you some activities in a minute when we finish up on this, on exactly what to do in your first couple of sessions, which will create that buy-in. And secondly, what will happen when people deselect themselves.
Let's talk about that cultural shift, because I know, Mark, you in venture capitalists, you see those mergers come together all the time, two entirely different cultures coming together. Shifting a culture is one of the biggest challenges, not just perception of it, but actually doing it.
It's epic because usually the incentives aren't shifted and there's not a recognition of what's really changed. And so your point is a huge one.
Yeah.
Right.
With culture, I mean, in my opinion, culture quite simply is when everyone is thinking the same way, as opposed to people thinking, have other ideas on how things should be done around here. And with that, it's just all behaviour driven. And then agreement to head in the same direction.
Now, take us a bit more then into creating the smaller tribe or the smaller movement and growing from there. Give us an understanding of that.
Okay, so there needs to be an end game. Okay, so when you go and start a movement with an organisation, they need to know then there's going to be a date. So we've got something to strive for. The first question I always ask when we go into organisation is quite simply, what do we need to improve on to become number one in the industry? And then hand out post-it notes, okay? And just basically let them go for it. Ask them to write very clearly. And then you dissect the company into the heart and the brain of the organisation. Now, the brain is the hard stuff, the systems, the processes, the products. The heart is the communication, relationships, and culture. And then once you do, you then put it into the two categories. And then you ask each individual to choose one thing, just one thing, we call it a leadership act, that is going to fix this, or just one small thing on the heart of the business first.
So you get them to focus on the heart first.
Yes.
Now, explain to me then why the tribe, though, because I think this is really important for everyone to understand, that shifting a small group first, not just going to the whole organisation at once.
Yeah, because that group there can impact up to a couple hundred people along the way. So they need to stand for what they believe is the correct attitudes and behaviours and where they're going. So you've got to create a nucleus. It's like you're creating a whole new energetic shift in an organisation, and it's heart-driven. And so when you do these leadership acts each week, or business success acts, because employees don't like to do leadership acts because they're not a leader in their eyes. And so what happens is you do a scoreboard on who's delivering each week on what they want to do. So we're not coming in and asking them to do anything. And you start seeing who's engaged and who isn't engaged. Right? And this is where the conversation comes up is, I'm too busy, I've got too much on my plate to do. So these are the sorts of problems that we need to uncover. And so with these one small leadership acts each week, it's so simple, yet so powerful. And at the end of 12 weeks, everyone's worked on the heart of the business, and then you start focusing on the brain of the business.
You know, there's a powerful point here that Rich and Marshall have made about really also getting focused on what are the few things you need to be working on. One of the hallmarks, I think, of being able to coach a team to success is to realize that 360 or the evaluation you did, we all have to improve on an awful lot of stuff. And the last thing a winner likes to hear is that you're going to be boiling the ocean. And it can't really address, in the context of business objectives, all this stuff we really got to change about ourselves. I'm really broken. So what we work with these teams to do is to have that individual leader choose that one thing or those two things that they're going to address, and then they're recruiting their stakeholders around them to make that change. And here's the great dividend, because a lot of people will say, well, wait, she or he's not going to change in these 36 other ways they need to be fixed. The truth is, actually, they do improve, because there's one thing you give a winner, and that is a win. So if they are able to start to make the changes that Marshall and Rich are talking about, this is what I've experienced over and over again, and it's an amazing dividend. Once they've proven to themselves and others they can shift those perceptions, everything else gets better.
Well, yeah.
I can win at this. I can do this better.
Well, you know, let's a simple example. Let's say you become a better listener.
Yeah.
Okay, what happens to your score in treating people with respect? Up. Team building, up. Customer satisfaction, up. And as I mentioned earlier, friend and family member, up.
Yeah, you take it home.
It
You
all
take
gets
to the
better.
office.
It all gets better.
It all gets
Now,
better.
once people start getting wins, they start to buy in more.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
I want to go back to, though, guys, there will be some buyout in this process. I don't want anyone watching this to think, wow, my whole team's going to magically buy in.
Right.
Some of your team are going to need to leave at this point. And a lot of what this does, of asking them for buy-in, is illustrate to you who actually needs to leave.
That's right.
You know, and identifying who needs to leave is one of the greatest things about this whole process is that, hey, this guy put his hand up and said, I'm out of here. Excellent.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and I
Happy
remember
for you.
all of us, I'm sure all of us, our first employee that we ever had that left, we got all upset. And now we're like, okay, room for someone new.
Another question to ask your employees is quite simply, what are the 5 behaviours that we want to live and breathe by, that we can be measured on when we walk into the organisation and out? And so this takes a lot of pressure off the business owner to have to come in and say, hey, listen, you're always late, or your performance is lacking. So once they all agree to it, and then they hold each other accountable to it, then everyone else can. This is where equality comes in. Okay, and then if they're disengaged heavily, they're more than likely wanting to run their own show. And so this will unearth.
Yeah. So creating a buy-in, getting a collective accountability amongst the team to have a set of performance standards that they all agree to work with and that fit within the entire organization to move forward. Again, you're going to have some buyout, but ultimately, gang, our job here is start with evaluation and then move the buy-in. Get the small wins on the board so that everyone feels like they're a part of and moving forward with the organization.